Uh, Good evening. This is the Devar Torah on Parashat Chukas. It's a relatively short parsha in terms of verses, but has many complex and deep ideas. Just to give a very brief overview of the parsha, it begins with the command of the Para Adamah, which was the red heifer in English, that Bnei Israel is commanded to burn it. And if somebody was dipped with the ashes and ashes and water and dipped with that water combination, sprinkled twice in the 7 day period, helped to remove their tumus mace impurity from the dead. Now, the reason it's such a complex law, besides its actual details, is that it has a purifies those atonement, but those who are Torah pure, it makes them impure, though on a lighter level of impurity. Because tumas makes the tumah from exposure to dead bodies, or places where dead bodies are, is the strongest. From there, Parsha goes on. One of the people are protesting lack of water. It says, take the staff, and God spoke to Moses, take the staff, you and Aaron, and Baal Moshe Kachet, V'mita V'hakayel, and Eidus Ata Aaron V'kika V'dibra El Salah, L'neim Natam Meyav, V'hotzim L'hamayim, Minasela, Sheetat et Eidus, and Kol Be'er. And it's saying to speak to the rock, and it will give forth, you'll bring forth from the rock, our community and their livestock to drink. Then I'm going to go on to address what happened after that. But the thing is, because they did not do what they were supposed to, Moshe and Aaron, they wound up not being allowed to go into the land by God. After that, the parsha continues. There's an account of the king of Edom. They won't let the people in. Aaron then dies, and the king of Arad attacks, and Hashem makes a miracle. And they then move on to the territory of Edom, but the Edomites won't allow them to go. Again, there's more protests about water. Shem sends poison snake against the people. People make a copper snake. Moshe, this copper snake, God tells Moshe that will cure it. Again, that is the whole thing in itself. And then they sang a sing of victory, another share. And from there, they were confronting Sikh and Ogon, two of the camps, two of the kingdoms. Nice east of the Jordan River, defeated both of them. There was a shear, and those two lands were occupied. Sikh Og. Now, the question I want to deal with is that of Moshe breaking the rock instead of speaking to it. It is one of the most commented on sections of the Sefer Bamidbar, and is one of the most perplexing questions on the whole issue on what did Moshe do wrong? Why was breaking the rock rather than speaking to it? And there are many, many answers. There's comments, there's different explanations, at least in dozens, maybe the hundreds over the many centuries Um, I'm hoping to forthcoming give more details share, but as this is the Var Torah, I'm going to only discuss a few of these commentaries. Let me read the verses. They're fairly straightforward. Quoted one of them. I'm telling them to do it. So what did Moshe do? Yikach Moshe Edamita, Nifnei Hashem, Kesher Tzivi, took the staff as he instructed. And then Kehu Moshe and Aaron at Kahal, Alpanei Sela, and Shmuel, now Marim, Min Hasela, and Masela, Yinotzelachem. I said, listen, you rebels, shall we produce water for you from this rock? He raised his hand, Yed Moshe Yodo, Yachet Hasela, Mahu Mayim, Yotsu Mayim Rabim, Tishta Edis Chrim. Huge amount of water gushed out in the community, and the animals were able to drink. And then God says something again, which is also has many answers. Hashem Moshe Aaron Ayin Lo Eminatem Ki Kadishim Bnei Bnei Yisrael V'Kein Lo Tavo Et Kahal. Zeh El Eretz Neshe Natin Lechem. Not going to give you those waters. I'm not going to let you in. And said, Imam Mariba Rabu Bnei Yisrael and Hashem Kadesham. And when the Israelites disputed with God, he nevertheless was sanctified. Hashem's name was sanctified. Now, there's a few questions here. What did Moshe do wrong by breaking the rock? That's number one, because he broke the rock in Parshas and Sefer Shmos. And in fact, Hashem told him to break the rock and water came out. So why this time did he have to speak to the rock? Now, looking at the timing, this is all happening 40 years later. This was 40 years after the sin of Meraglim. The next generation is about to enter Eretz Israel. And a number of questions. What did he do wrong? Second of all, was it a misunderstanding on his part, or did he deliberately do it for the greater good? And why, in the whole case, did Hashem ask Moshe to do that whole thing with the water? Speaking, instead of just giving water or having Moshe pray for water, why did it have to be done in this visual way? Now, I'd first like to address those who say Moshe did for what he thought was the greater good. One opinion that's given is that he did it because he foresaw, was worried that the Erev Rav, the ones who led the Jews to sin of the Egel Zahav, would make more trouble. And if he went in and the Jewish people did not merit being at the level where he came in, I'll explain that more in a minute, because it would have been a miraculous entry. The enemy would have run in 6 directions, and Moshe would have found the temple, not will have to wait 400 years, would have found it on the location on the spot in Jerusalem. Would have been a very different reality. But he was worried that they would succumb to the error of Rav and therefore be destroyed, because the temple built by him could not have been destroyed. So the Jewish people would have been destroyed. Now, that's one. A second one is from the Dekuni Zohar, Kaf Aleph. So Hashem is telling to speak and do it. Now, why speaking instead of acting? Because as Zohar explains, active speaking is on a higher level because it shows the upper levels. What would have happened? Abram brought to Israel, as I said before, and the Holy Land and final redemption have been safe. Now, and according to one commentary on this explanation of Zohar, it was felt that he didn't think, again, the Jewish people at the level that they merited it, but he also had another consideration. By breaking the rock rather than keeping it, he kept the light that Hashem asked them to bring forth in concealment. They could not have been raised to the level they should have been. That's another way of looking at it. But again, he thought that was good for the Jewish people in the long run, because if they had gone in that way, miraculously, they wouldn't have had to earn the Torah. It would have been easy. They wouldn't have had to strive. They hadn't struggled. No exiles. So Moshe figured that, well, he was giving them an opportunity to earn the light, earn it in their own merit, and not go the easy way Hashem had intended. Now, again, Moshe was doing it. Shem Shemaimi was doing it for the good motivations. However, he still did not do what Hashem commanded, and this is one possible line of explanations. Can we understand why many commentaries don't go with this? Because they say that that Moshe would openly disagree with Hashem for whatever good motivations, not seem in track with the rest of his life. Since Hashem had made him the leader of the Jewish people. Now that's one school. Now, for those who say he didn't deliberately do it, and that's many of the commentaries, there's variations on what exactly he did wrong and why. But I'm going to ask a further question, which this is also going to be based on the oral time, of why was this whole display needed? We could have very simply, Hashem could have given him water, Moshe could have sent the water. Why did it need to be done in this way? What was Hashem trying to do? Now you have to look. The audience this time, the Bnei Israel, now were very different from 40 years ago. That was the generation that came out of Egypt, who eventually, after testing Hashem 10 times, and they were the Meraglim, wound up not going in. This generation was super high. In fact, it was at the level Amadim Kabul for the Chait. They were super high level. And if they had gone in, it wouldn't have been a problem. The only trouble is, it wouldn't have lasted. Maybe this generation, a generation or two later, it wouldn't have lasted. So, what Hashem wanted, and this is explained by the Or Chaim, Hashem wanted them to be elevated permanently, because if they had, Moshe would have went in, the temple would have been discovered quickly, and as I explained in the Tikkun Zohar, these states I explained from a slightly different aspect, it would have elevated us incredibly, and there would have been no more sinning by the Jewish people, and therefore the Hashem's purpose for the Jewish people would have been fine, and the exiles wouldn't have been needed, our enemies wouldn't have been needed, past the ones we had already experienced. Now, according to this, what was the sin that he did? So therefore, what was the Avera? Now, this, it's interesting that it's discussed in four ways. It's mentioned four times in the Chumash. And and what happened was a number of explanations again. Now, just to give a couple of examples, there's numerous sources on this. One, briefly, Rashi explains, New York Times brings this also, in the name of the Rashi, that Moshe's error was that he was supposed to speak to the rock, and instead he struck it. That's number one. Because if they had spoken, as he explained, if the rock could respond slowly to Moshe's verbal command, the people which do not speak and hear is not in need of sustenance, obeys the word of Hashem, surely must always obey Hashem command, and that was one possible explanation. Now the Ramban gives another one, that since there was no commandment, no appearance of Hashem Shekhinah or anything, the Ramban, among others, explains that it looked like Moshe now were bringing it forth, and they should have should have addressed Hashem, that Hashem was performing the miracle. And there's many other explanations. Now, Yochaim has many arguments against those, which and describe, for example, describing the act. There's arguments against that, because there are other times Moshe had done miracles at Hashem's command where it wasn't specifically shown. So the Yochaim wants to give him a separate explanation. And he points out, again, we'll be giving a share on this, but it points in near future, well, I'll go into this more at length. It's quoted four times, and this is he based on the Midrash and Yalkut Shimoni, and he says there were four sins. Here it says, you did not believe in me. In the Varim, you did not sanctify me. Varim chapter 32, you transgressed trespassed against me, you defied my word. And what does he believe in? Where does the believe in come? Because he wants to say, I did not tell you to struck the rock, but yet you struck it. You did not sanctify me. You made induce water from any rock that people wanted. You did not do so. And that's when he became angry, Moshe, that they were expecting it. 3, you trespass against me. Shall we bring forth from this rock? He questioned Hashem, and he told him any rock, fly to my word, for I said to you, and speak to the rock. What did it mean? Well, he's citing a chapter of Torah over it. And those are the four problems. Now, Moshe was trying to follow it as best as he could. And you have some questions on this. What was the purpose of the staff? If he was not going to use it, if he was not going to use it, um, what was he keeping it for? And first of all, it had Hashem's name on it. That's one version, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And by doing that, it would show that this is being done by that command of Hashem and his creative name, which he created all the world. Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elohim. The second one, I commanded you to produce water from any rock. You didn't do that. You trespassed me. You didn't bring water forth from any from this rock. Find my word. I said, speak to the rock. Say Torah. Now, Moshe on each one of these could be said to make a legitimate mistake. Just to give you one example, that the staff be it taken and was shown, Hashem had a heavenly power. And there's many other explanations. Now, to continue, Moshe did not do any of those. Did not do it. And again, I'm going to be giving Shur this way, go at some length on the different ways he could have interpreted it. In any event, Moshe misunderstood because perhaps he was in a haste, because he was getting a lot of pressure from the people, and they did not analyze it as clearly as they should have. And when he couldn't go in, it wasn't a punishment, but it's something that had to be done. It inevitably flowed from it, because once they didn't, even though this generation was elevated, future generations wouldn't be. The base of Mikdash would have to be the base of Mikdash built by Moshe would have had to be destroyed. It couldn't be, so the Jewish people would have had to be destroyed, and that would have defeated the whole purpose of the universe, which is our keeping Torah and mitzvahs, and we maintain the world through that. Its world would have gone back to Tohu Bohu. And as an additional proof to this explanation, the Or Chaim, in addition, is that if you look at David Melech, now in the first temple era, David was originally told he was going to build the temple. Yet, then he's told he's not going to build the temple. Now, what was going on there? David Melech merited it. Now, he thought it was because he had spilled blood in wars, but it wasn't. It was because the prophet Nassim came back to him and said, the blood you spill in the wars with Hashem's commandment is like blood of the sacrifice, korban, sprinkling them in the mizbeach, the altar. So why couldn't he do it? Because any temple built by David Melech couldn't have been destroyed, and when the Jewish people later sinned, they would have had to have been destroyed. So this is a sampling of this very unusual and perplexing story of Moshe and Aaron, why they couldn't go in, and what was the whole sin, in quotation marks on perhaps. And we have to learn What I'd like to derive from this, that Hashem's ways are very deep. We can't always understand his ways. Even Moshe Rabbeinu was at one point not able to understand, at least according to the Yochai. And right now, in the turbulent times we must remember that Hashem is guiding the world. He's the master of the world. And even though we don't understand all the events that have been happening now and are continuing to happen, we should have full faith and trust in Hashem, that He is guiding everything towards the ultimate redemption. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.